So how do you get started with the story? Like, how do ideas come to you? And then are you kind of an outliner? Do you just kind of write it as you go and see what happens? Like, kind of what's your process for that?
So I'm definitely an outliner. I've got that down to a fine science. Like, I understand. I've done a lot of reading on story beats and story structure. I've played around with like different story structures. Like there's a Japanese one, then we have our modern Western one, which is the rising climax and stuff like that. And ultimately what happens is if I get an idea, I'll jot it down, right? I know Stephen King has this thing where it's like if you sleep on it, it's still there, then it's good. But I'll throw it like on a notepad and chuck it somewhere. And if I really want to come back to it, I'll still remember it and I'll go find it in the notepad, right? But for me to really want to do something, I have to love the idea. Like I have to be like super passionate about it. I can't be kind of like, maybe this would work. I have to like feel it. And a good example of that is probably going to be a book that I wrote under Faye Black. It's called Roll D20. And that is a romance story about two, I want to call them nerds, right? One's a game store owner. The other one is an artist in the industry. So they're the ones that do all of like the posters for games and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
And so I basically wrote about their love story coming together. And just to give you an idea of how much I love this idea, I outlined the whole thing in one day, right? And then I wrote the whole book in 1 week.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, that was like how hungry I was for it. So if you're not like hungry to like write your story, then it's kind of hard to like really go after it. If you're doing like that kind of like I keep using the word whimsical, right? Because that's how it feels to me.
Yeah.
But if you're kind of being kind of like nilly with it, and you're kind of like, oh, maybe I'll put this in there, or maybe I'll do that. Like, no, man, this thing's kind of like grab you by the neck and shake you around and be like, fucking for it.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Just saw a post or like a quote or something. I think it was from C.S. Lewis, and this is not like totally accurate, but basically what he said was like, don't become a writer just to become a writer. Like you have to become a writer because there's a story you want to tell or that you want to tell good stories. Because if you want to just be a writer to be a writer, it's going to be very hard and lonely and you're going to hate it the whole time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you really gotta feel that fire. And even if I know I gave you the example of I wrote the whole book in a week, you don't have to write it in a week. But that's just like how big I was on it. Like, as long as you were kind of like, I can't wait to write this, or I'm so excited to do this scene or this moment, like I was dreaming about it. Like that's fantastic. I would, go for it.
Yeah, I definitely I haven't had that with a whole project. So I've got a prequel that I'm working on and then my book one. So I definitely have parts where like I get stuck and then I'm not sure what to do and I struggle, but then there are certain times where I get like a scene or a certain amount of scenes where I'm just like I can get it done in a couple hours and you just power through it, So that's always a good feeling.
It is. It's like such a great high because you walk out of like wherever it is that you're writing being like, I feel great and I feel kind of drunk and now like I need a drink.
Yeah, for sure. So where did having the two author names come from?
So that was a recommendation from one of my other author friends who's been doing it for a lot longer than me. Because at one point I read a book I didn't like. It was a romance book. And I said, I want to write a romance book. But Carrow Brown does not write romance. Carrow Brown usually writes like horror or action or sci-fi, right? So she told me in order to avoid audience confusion to make another pen name. And then she started telling me I was going to have to set up like a separate newsletter and another website and all this other shit. And I was like, that's way too much work. Like, I'm just not doing that.
Yeah.
But I did make a separate name. And on my website, I make it clear one is for one thing and the other one's for the other. So that way people don't have to wonder which book is which. So that's why I have two.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. I think I've heard that before from other people too, where it's just like, if you really want to change genres, having multiple names helps. Because didn't J.K. Rowling do that? She's got one that's like...
She's got two. She's got the two that we know of. I think she's got a third one somewhere. Because I found that authors, when they kind of reach like that level of like notoriety, they're always wondering if people are buying the book because their name is on it or because they like the story, right? Sure. Stephen King did that too. So it wouldn't surprise me if there's like a third book name out there with her stuff on it that nobody knows about. Yeah. Because I think when she came out with the one that's like Robert something, whatever that one is, I think when all the books like still had on them her name, J.K. Rowling or something. So I wouldn't surprise me if she had one out there that nobody knows, Yeah.